an outreach and there wasn't can you run a presidency with just the people who brung you, which looks like what he's thinking about doing?
For the short term, yes. But when the battles start and you have to get 60 votes in the Senate, then there is no way to run an explicitly and strictly Republican effort. And I'm focused now on healthcare because that's the number one issue for a lot of Americans. And there is no way that you can repeal it with 51 votes, but you can't replace it under 60.
Yeah. Susan, you mentioned before the speech that Richard Nixon was a template perhaps for President Trump. And I went back and looked at that. There was a dark part of that speech, but he started it with a lot of light and just one line from it. We cannot learn from one another until we stop shouting at one another, until we speak quietly enough so that our words can be heard as well as our voices. That's the piece that was missing from Donald Trump.
That's right. And previous presidents in their inaugural addresses have said things are bad. Ronald Reagan said things were bad. You know, presidents have taken over at times of greater national crisis than we face now, but they haven't been quite so unrelenting about it. I was surprised he didn't begin by acknowledging what President Obama has achieved as president. He thanked him for the transition effort, but he didn't say, for instance, you took over at a time of financial crisis and steered us through it. He didn't acknowledge the presence on stage of the Democrat he defeated, Hillary Clinton. He acknowledged her later at the congressional.
In an act of unity came.
Yeah. So he didn't, it's not only that he was dark, that's happened before, it's that he didn't seem gracious to his foes. He didn't reach out to the people who did not vote for him.
But I think that's part of the psychology, though, of what the administration is trying to do. Because for people who supported Donald Trump, you cannot be against Barack Obama enough. And for him to have done more, for him to have acknowledged more, I think would have put him in a very difficult position with his supporters. It was the case that was a speech for his supporters, but also a speech for people who didn't support him as well, to say, look, if you expected me to change, that's not going to happen.
What about this, Frank? Here's a theory. Shoot it down quickly, if you will. This was a speech to his supporters, and he's locked in tight with them, with the full knowledge of knowing that Washington's going to eat away at things. But in this big public moment, he wants to show, I am with you, that is what is in my heart, and all the things you may hear down the line about him capitulating or trimming his sails on a thing here and there to get legislation through, that won't be remembered. What will be remembered is he stood up there in that moment and spoke loud and proud about the things they love about him.
And he did. But that's not how you govern the country. You're not president of 46% of America. You're president of 100%. And in the green room before we came on, we were talking about our expectations for the future. I'm clearly the darkest person on this panel because I think we're going to remember this weekend for a long time to come as not the end, not the campaign being over, but this is the beginning of the most tempestuous, if that's the right word, the most, in my mind, awful conflict between left and right, between men and women, between young and old. I think we are breaking apart since 1968 when we lost some incredibly good people in this country. That's 50 years. I saw those signs in the parade, and they were so horrific. And they're 8, 9, 10-year-olds who are being taught to hate the other side. And that's the problem. When you teach young people to hate, you can't get it out of their system.
You know, John, you brought up Richard Nixon, and you're contrasting Nixon and Trump. Nixon didn't live in the social media age, and imagine Richard Nixon, by the way, with a Twitter account. That would have been something. Yeah. But I think to add on to what Frank's saying, I don't know if the climate, I don't know if technology is allowing people to see past their own hatreds.
It's not. It's actually encouraging it.
All right, let's take a pause here.